My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sangharan, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnani. I'm going to continue with Mahan's meditation method and particularly the benefits, right? So I spoke about how Mahan's meditation technique improves the brain, the body. These are the hardware, and then how this has a knock-on effect on our mind and our intellect, our personality, and eventually every facet of our material life. So it's very interesting, Mahan's practice, and by the way, most meditational practices, if you practice really well, intensively, you see that there are many benefits that one can get. And when you know those benefits and you become aware of it, your meditational sadhana or your meditational practice becomes more meaningful, more purposeful, more focused, more mission oriented, and more importantly, you are able to realize that impact and the value of this meditation. So many people just practice meditation for the sake of practicing without realizing what that transformation, the micro level transformation that takes place in our own body, our mind, our intellect, and our personality. And sometimes they miss that micro level changes, so they get distracted by many things in life. Eventually, they give up very easily. And I remember Mahan telling that, you practice this and you will see the changes in you. Of course, in the early days, the changes are very, very small, but you have to trust the guru. You have to be able to be intensive, focused in the changes that are happening, document it, and then try to validate your experience with that of Mahan's. And when Mahan is documented in this I Got book, his experience. It may vary from your own experience, or it may be consistent with your own experience. One needs to know that everybody's body and the biology is very different. Everybody's context and experiences of the world and how they see the world may be very different. While Mahan's meditational method shows us how to quieten the material world that we live in, that sometimes distract us, that sometimes torment us, sometimes sends us in a different direction. The technique helps us to be more peaceful, more calmer, more resolute to attain that quietude. Mahan experienced this, and in that experience, he started experiencing the changes in his own bodily experiences and his own personality, and he documented that. What I see is most people want to get the same Mahan's experience, and oftentimes they don't get it because his biology and his circumstances may be very different. So what we see here is that one needs to be able to take the essence of this meditational practice, put it into one's own life, be diligent in that practice, introspect very deeply of how this practice helps one, write down the changes that are happening in one's own life, contemplate how these practices either improves or not improve your life, and what are the things that you need to do, and what are the things that Mahan and all the other great saints and others who have practiced this have tried to do in their own lives. And then reflect back on what you practice and what you had experienced before the practice and after the practice. And are there changes that you see in yourself, in your thought processes, in the words that come out of your mouth, in the actions, and also your own experience of, whether you go through a turbulent experience or whether you're able to moderate and modulate those turbulences better. So this is something that we always have to do this. And don't follow any teachings dogmatically, but you have to put it to practice with an experiential, wisdom enriched knowledge. This is why Mahan always says, Arivin, Arival, Arivin, Telivu. He says that the knowledge is important, but the knowledge must translate into experience. The experience must translate into wisdom. That wisdom must translate into enlightened way of life. So this is the journey that, as I was reflecting back, practicing Mahan's teachings for many, many years, more than 45 years this year, that some things I documented, and I hope that this will help you. As Mahan's experiences, his context and his biology was very different. The essence of the practice is constant for everybody, but the experience may vary. Right. So this is something that, and of course, Mahan has documented this. Many of this can be seen in his book, uh, according to his own way of life. This is the journey that I experience and want to share with you. Of course, as I spoke about, the 3 stages of the initiation process is so important. This is something that is fixed and permanent uh, of Mahan's teachings, but one can put this to practice slightly. The initiation process is the same, but how and when you practice depends very much on you. But allocate time for yourself in the morning for you to at least start off with this meditational practice, and then ensure that this meditational practice is carried through. Whenever you have quiet time, bring that focus on your third eye and the top eye. But more importantly, being in that connected state, right? Watching always your thoughts. There are moments that, our thoughts get distracted by people who may annoy you or or distract us. We always have to be resolute in not being perturbed by this. Every time our mind gets distracted, it is hard to get back. And for sometimes, sometimes you realize it, you pull back very quickly. Sometimes you don't realize it, you pursue it, it's hard to pull back. And the more you are distracted, the more likely that to get that connected state becomes more challenging. So I always say that, while the Guru gives this initiation, how you harness this divine flame very much lies in our own hands. One can intensify, one can integrate it, one can, speak about it, one can infuse it in every facet of their life so that they get connected at every moment, right? So these 3 stages of initiation is so important in this Mahan's practice, and you can put this in, your different, in every moment of your life, from the time you wake up to reading your newspaper, having your breakfast, being in the office, all those things. You'll see that sudden change in how you see the world starts happening right in all stages of your life, with yourself, with your family, with your, in your professional life, in your office, with your community. All those things slowly starts, that micro level changes that happens. Eventually, over time, you start seeing, even others may say, hey, your personality has changed. You have become more quieter, you've become more resolute, you become, there's a glow. And this is something we saw in the I God book, that when Mahan was practicing his meditation intensively, someone said, hey, you look like a guru, right? You seem to permeate that brilliance, that tejas. In that same way, when we practice this, we see those micro level changes in us. We will be the first witness to that change before anybody else sees this. So these 3 stages of meditation is so important. This is something I always say, that we cannot afford not to do it. Like how, when we wake up in the morning, the first thing we do is we brush our teeth. That is because we want to make sure that when we have a conversation, we don't offend others. In that same way, this is more important than brushing the teeth, right? I'm not saying brushing the teeth is not important. It is important, but this practice is more important because you are presenting your mind to yourself and to everyone else. So this practice is, very important for our spiritual growth. It is also very important to give us that connectedness, that discovery of our spiritual compass. That's why I say it is more important than anything that we do in life. Right? You can have the most important project, the most important relationship, the most important, but all that can wait. You know, the spiritual connectedness is the most important thing, because if you did this really well, you perform very well in every station of our lives, at every moment. So it is the foundation that shapes our own life values and our own personalities. Right? So, and I showed that by this spiritual connectedness, there is a connectedness to everything that we do in this life, right? How that spiritual connectedness ensures our brain and our body is healthy. That helps us to strengthen our mental and emotional state. We don't get impacted very easily, or, distracted very easily. There's a sense of clarity of thought, and in that our intellect becomes more sharper, more deeper, more broader. That helps us in introspecting, contemplating, reflecting, and most importantly, in that, find ways to touch the base of our soul, or that quietude that is lurking within us, which is lost because of our so caught up in this material world. And this expansion of the talent helps us to be creative, new ideas. We discover so many things, so much so that even we discover the creative force and the creator itself. We can make sense of how all this came about, right? Nothing becomes complex. And you see that in that process, we discover our own natural talent that nature has blessed us with. I always keep saying that, nature has not given everybody everything, but nature has given some aspect of nature in all of us, and it's for us to discover. But we can only discover it if we have that mental peace, the intellectual depth, and the creative, you know, acumen. When we have the natural talent, we're able to relate to everybody. It could be a child right up to a scientist and a well-educated person. We're able to, relate to everyone with a graceful and kind mind and thought. You see that this is one of the major transformation in our personality that takes place. People with a very hard heart or mind slowly start melting, and you see that our emotional intelligence become profound. We're able to relate to many people. We become very tactful. We use a lot of diplomacy in addressing complex issues. And you see that if you are in a professional circle, you see that your ability to do very well during the most difficult circumstances becomes, your asset. There is a very important statement that I keep saying, that character is what we are when we take decisions during the most challenging moments of our lives. That's what builds character. In the most challenging moments, we curse people, we become angry, that's the character that we permeate. But in the most difficult period, if we are forgiving, we're kind, we're gentle, that's the personality that we have. So that personality is what helps us to tap into the infinite possibility and potential. We're not perturbed by it. We have that inner resource, a self-sufficiency to manage our own emotional state, not just empowering ourselves, because in the crisis, sometimes we can't see the solutions, but only a mind that is calm and cool will be able to have that empowerment to themselves and empower other people to transcend those challenges. And that's what leadership is. Leadership is about being able to show directions in the most difficult period of our lives, or when a team is going through most difficult challenges. And I spoke about the wow mindset or the GP Mahan's values. That's what this meditation teaches us. There are many followers, but very few are leaders. And even among leaders, there are very few leaders that have that wow mindset, that gracefulness, the patience, the mastery, the awareness of the self, the humility, the agility of the mind, and the nobility in the qualities to lead. So that's the leadership. So it could be leading ourselves to the right path, leading our families, leading the place where we're working, becoming a community leader, a national leader, a global leader, right? That leadership quality doesn't happen, randomly. It is actually by design. And the orchestrator and the designer is none other than our own self. And if the mind spends time to know the self, the mind will acquire the leadership qualities. That leadership qualities I always call it's the CEO, not the chief executive officer, but the chief enlightenment or enlightened officer that is within all of us. If we discover that big CEO, then we can discover that small CEO, which is the chief executive officer. When we are enlightened, we have executive power over ourselves and the things around us. And if we are not enlightened, we have no control, no any executive power. So this is the leadership quality. If we had that, then you see that, we will know how to manage our finances. We will know how to create that material wealth that is needed to support our life and that of our family and help others. We're able to build that quality of life that we want. By having that quality of life, we have the resources to invest into the ICRMS. When we have financial security, we don't worry about when the next meal is coming, or whether we have paid the rent, or whether if there are, creditors chasing us, right? And more importantly also is that when we acquire the spiritual mindset, we don't waste our resources. We ensure that we live a quality life, but we don't spend, blindly. We save, use it appropriately for our own development, that of our family, that of our community, and more importantly, helping others. And this is what Mahan and Guru Sankaran did. The important part of that economic well-being or the capital is that if we divinize it, we see that we acquire that quality of life and the peace of mind that helps us to reinforce that spiritual connectedness. Because now we have time to be able to take time off from work or do our work more, in a way that gives us time to do spiritual things, charitable things. So that resources helps us to invest into learning new things, doing deeper things without the worry of, when the next meal or when the next payment I have to make. So it takes that off. The financial security takes off all that so that we can spend time on spiritual things. And that's what gives us peace of mind and quality of life. I know many people worry about, hey, what happens after retirement? I stop working. What do I do? Do I still have to work? Some of them are working long hours, even though they're 60, 70 years old, right? And it's hard for them to meditate, right? So I always tell young people, who take this journey, spend money on the right things and save money so that by the time you're 55, 60 years old, you have financial independence. That's also spiritual life. So that financial resources helps us to invest in our own education, training, gives us the peace of mind and the quality of life, but also helps us to focus on our own spiritual connectedness. We can take time off, go and do other things, maybe go visit places, take a pilgrimage somewhere, go to a particular ashram, learn new things, go on sabbatical, spiritual sabbatical, to be able to do the things that we want to reinforce our spiritual connectedness. So I call this the virtual cycle of enlightened life, that it starts with spiritual connectedness, keeps our body and mind healthy, sharpens our intellect, helps us to discover the natural talent in us, helps us to develop, nurture good, strong, positive relationships and interactions, empowers us and others, develop leadership qualities so that we are able to lead things in our lives, and most importantly, to ensure that we are prosperous in this material world, so that not to, blow our ego, but to be prosperous, to be able to help others, help ourselves, and most importantly, to have the time to spend some time, quality time on our own spiritual pursuit without any worry or concern. So this circle, as we develop our own material resources, we can invest into our own spiritual connectedness, and that cycle continues. And as we do this over time, you see that our lives become more enlightened, more blissful, and becomes a spectacular life. We really enjoy what we do. So there is a convergence between our spiritual life and our material life. In many places, many people say, well, no, to acquire the spiritual life, you have to give up desires and give up everything. This Mahan taught me that spiritual life and material life can both converge. And that is the greatest thing that we can do to attain an enlightened life. We cannot run away from our own duties and our own responsibilities. So Mahan has advocated that stay in your own circumstances, in your own life experiences, in your own situations, and harness this meditation practice, and you see that your own material circumstances will start converging to becoming more spiritual, and the spiritual experience will enhance your material life. So there's a two-way feedback loop that strengthens, and ultimately something very interesting happens. At least this is for me, I've seen that true happiness is when spiritual life and material life are absolutely converged. There is no separation between the two, right? What we do spiritually enhances our material life. And what we do in our material life is also spiritualized. So there is no separation between the two. So when we look after our body, that is a spiritual pursuit. When we eat healthy, that is a spiritual pursuit. When we take time to do exercise, that is a spiritual pursuit. When we take time to meditate, that is a spiritual pursuit. When we take time to introspect, contemplate, reflect, and undertake service, that's a spiritual pursuit. When we take time to carefully curate our thoughts and expunge that which causes constriction and harm, that is a spiritual life. When we moderate and modulate the words that come out of our mouth, when we stop criticizing and dressing down people, when we are inspirational and when we are encouraging, that is spiritual. When our actions, helps nurture and develop us, our family, and the people around us, that's spiritual life, right? And when we look after Mother Nature, that's a spiritual life. And that's eventually you see that whatever we do in this material world is also spiritual. After all, the material body, everything came from that spiritual realm. So we are all God packaged differently. Only a mind that does not understand this sees the divergence. what Mahan taught me was that, and Guru Sankaran taught me, and my gurus taught me, is that there is no separation between spiritual life and material life for a Mahan. It's absolutely converged for the enlightened ones, the ones who acquire the jnana. So you see that in this converged state, all the 18 asuric qualities are absent. What is there is only the 18 divine qualities. And you see that when that happens in this absolute state, you see your personality is completely different from someone who has not realized this. And you see that, this is what enlightened experience is, not something that descends from heaven. It is this state that is omnipresent in us, but because we see the separation between material and spiritual life, we don't see them as one. This Mahan taught that how, by practicing this meditation, the spiritual cosmos and the material cosmos are one. He says, Iparamum, Aparamum, Ega Paraparamum, He says, the inner cosmos and the external cosmos, all I realize within me. So for me, this spiritual life that Swamiji spoke about and the material life are one. And that's what, we should endeavor to. And we continuously introspect, contemplate, reflect every moment of our lives, how our thoughts are, how to moderate and modulate our thoughts so that there's alignment between what we think in our spiritual realm, what we say in our spiritual realm, and what we act in our spiritual realm. And this is what that introspection, contemplation, reflection continuously happens until we attain that converged state. And this is the wonderful teaching of this great Mahan that walked upon this earth in the 20th century. I hope all of you all will take time to practice this meditation diligently. Look at the thoughts that are, running in your mind. Moderate and modulate that to align it to that spiritual realm that Swamiji has taught us through this meditational practice. And if you did that, I am sure that you'd say, hey, life is a spectacular, wonderful life, and you're not worried about anything. And you see that the guru and the divinity becomes the chariot of our lives. I always say to people that, I have a charioteer, and that is the divinity that Swamiji has showed me, that when that charioteer you discover, the divinity you discover, you don't worry about anything. You just go with the flow of where the charioteer is taking you. And you see that, even during the most difficult period of your life, it helps you navigate this journey in a beautiful, graceful, and wonderful way. And that's what makes life really spectacular. It takes you places where you never dreamt that you'd go. So I wish you all the best and spend some time knowing this Mahan's teachings and all the other Mahan's teachings to enrich your own spiritual life and your material life. With that, Sandosham, and wish you all the best.